Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Joseph Melika, the CEO of Cesppa. Good afternoon, Joseph.
Good afternoon, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing today?
Doing well, doing well.
Yeah. And what part of the world are you holed up in?
We are cooped up here in LA.
See, I'm out in the middle of the Caribbean. Actually, I'm in San Francisco, about 8 hours north of you. So, yeah. So, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. So I'm Joseph Melika, founder and CEO of Cesppa. My background is in cybersecurity. Started my career back about 20 years ago. Dabbled into infrastructure development, software development, and specialized in security, I would say probably about 10 years ago or so. Did some work for Apple's advertising, built out their security practice, and for about 4 or 5 years. Then I worked for Verizon Digital Media, the business unit that acquired Yahoo and AOL. Did security there as well for another 4 or 5 years. And for the last couple of years, I've been having fun working on Cesppa.
Cool. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as a remote employee and employer?
So I've had a lot of experience with that. Most of my teams have traditionally been working remotely, but especially now with the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that we're experiencing now, that's kind of forced on everybody. It's the forced evolution that everybody got to work remotely. So those who actually had the advantage of operating remotely figured out some operating structures, some procedures to communicate, to keep people involved and included, and not kind of operate in a silo. But I guess it works for a lot of different departments and a lot of different teams almost naturally by default. You find developers and particularly technical folks tend to kind of enjoy being working remotely. Different teams kind of prefer to collaborate face-to-face. So those are the ones that may be facing more struggles now adapting to the new environment. But me personally, I love it. Our company is 100% remote. Our team operates from all over the world. And of course, we have a community of security researchers, about 1,700 researchers who are around the globe.
Wow, that's a lot of people researching cybersecurity.
Yeah, so our business model, real quick, it's a cybersecurity marketplace. So businesses engage us to kind of facilitate a way to engage that community of security researchers to find security vulnerabilities in their applications. So we're vertical agnostic. It could be customers could be mobile applications providers, mobile games, SaaS providers, any type of technology-based company is ultimately looking for to keep up with security. And they want to know what's broken, why is it bad for my business, and what do I need to do to fix it. So our business model is to engage all these smart folks around the world, basically 1,700 of my best friends. They're security experts, great people, smart people, good people who know how to do bad things. They're basically in business of identifying these security vulnerabilities for our clients, reporting them to us. We verify it, validate it, reward them for it financially, and then report that to our clients.
Wow. So just out of curiosity, do you do things after the fact, or do you ever do it proactively? Like, do you ever go out and see if you can find vulnerabilities?
So a little bit of both. So our clients engage us typically to keep an eye on their applications. A lot of companies struggle to build a team internally who can keep up with the demand and with everything that just we get bombarded with as far as this breach of this company, how did they exploit it, all these zero-day vulnerabilities that get discovered and announced on a daily basis now. It's hard for an internal team to keep up with all of that, regardless of the size of the team that you have. So our business is to complement the team that you have internally, or even before you start building out a team like that, our community is experts, professionals who are able to continuously identify these vulnerabilities for you, report it to you, and help you out with your security risk identification.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our business model.
Cool. And I would think that it would be hard for an internal, developer or security person to detect their own security vulnerabilities because they designed the system, so they think they've closed it off, correct?
That's very true. So it's hard for the person who's been staring at the code all day to see what they what they may have done wrong. But it's a lot of times it's not so much that the developer did something wrong. It's really because it takes a different perspective to look at an application. What I mean by that is a developer's mindset is to make a function work or make a feature work. So let's say, just super simplifying it here, let's say I'm building a mobile application for a banking system. And I want to have this button that when you push on it, when you're logged in as Mark, you push that button, it returns all your financial data. Now, as a developer, I'm making that button work. I'm making it look good, I'm making it look right, and I'm making it respond correctly. What developers tend to, security researchers tend to do is do what's called man in the middle. They see what that button actually sends back to the backend API or the backend system, and what is it actually sending, and what comes back. And they almost look under the hood, and they see, let's say, for the sake of example, when Mark pushes the button, the request goes back to the API and says, give me all the financial data for user ID 123. So that person now stops that request and manipulates that number and say, give me back the financial data for user 124. And boom, all of a sudden I'm getting someone else's financial data. Now, of course, this is kind of trivializing the vulnerability, but a lot of times it's actually not that super complex. Most of the breaches that we've heard about have been simple things like this or similar to that, whereas just looking at it through the right lens and trying to identify how the application works, take it apart, and try to just manipulate small things to see what else you can get.
Wow, that's fascinating. That seems really interesting. It's funny, I used to work at a bank, a pretty big bank, I won't say which one, and I worked in the database department with the customer database. And there was a rule that I had to go away and not come in the building for 2 straight weeks every year, so that they could make sure that I wasn't doing anything illegal. Or, yeah, that's what, and I think I don't know if they still do that, but they still probably look at those people very closely.
I'm sure.
And my program was the one that actually updated balances.
Oh.
And handled every transaction. So, it's one of those ones where you can add a penny for every transaction, and when you do millions of transactions a day, it adds up.
Oh yeah, I've seen Office Space. I know what you guys could do.
Yeah. Interesting. So what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
Well, I think now with the forced evolution, as I mentioned, on companies right now, companies are actually looking at or questioning, do we really have to have an office? After this is over, after we are now saying, okay, you can go back to work. One, we've already operationalized a lot of our functions and our teams to operate remotely. We figured out how to make it work over the last now 6-7 weeks. And God knows how long it's going to take until we get back. But over that time, now we've adapted. So the question is going to be, do we really need to go back? Which opens up even better additional opportunities that we didn't have before. Is now that we've adapted to that, I can now hire people who actually work in different places around the country or around the globe. I'm not tied down to my office location anymore, because my developers don't need to meet on a daily basis for their daily stand-ups. They already figured out how to do it over Zoom or Hangout or Slack. So all of this adaptation that happened, I think, is going to force every company to reevaluate whether they actually need a physical location. And if they do, how big of a footprint they need to have moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that the key word you said there was footprint. I think what's going to happen is a lot of officers are still going to have an office space, but how big will it be? Because I don't see everybody going into the office every day.
Absolutely. And there's always going to be functions and departments that require physical interaction, require human interaction, or require being on site. So all those folks are going to probably have to go back. But really, you're going to have to look at your entire organization and see every single department and say, do they have to have an office? If not, what can we do to help them stay as effective working remotely and incentivize them for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, what is the story behind Cesppa? You've already gone over who your customers are on that, but what led you to start this company?
Oh boy, so that goes back to so 20 years ago or so. I grew up in Egypt and moved here when I was 17, right after high school. Came here and started kind of falling in love with computers and internet, and I eventually got into telecom and voice over IP. But during that sort of forced lockdown that I faced back then in 1996 or late 90s, I started looking at security vulnerabilities. And I did some work with AOL at the time, did some, ended up being consulting, but it started out with me actually breaking into their system and sending an email and saying, hey, I found a security vulnerability. I just wanted to let you know about it. And that evolved into a consulting gig back when I was a teenager. And then, of course, as I mentioned, got into different startups and infrastructure roles and information technology in general roles. And then after that, I got back into security again. And then I went and worked for Verizon that ended up acquiring AOL. And I was in charge of security there, security engineering, which was kind of closing the loop on a big part of my story there. But when I was at Verizon, I worked on different verticals within security. There is the cloud security, system security, different identity access management, and then application security. One thing that I realized there was almost no way for me to staff a team internally to continuously find security vulnerabilities in all the applications that were under my purview. It was just kind of the cat and mouse game, the whack-a-mole game. I have to keep looking, and I have to hire the best of the best and hopefully give them the right direction to continuously find that. And that's when I discovered the bug bounty model, fell in love with it, and I worked with a couple of platforms that are around today that were absolutely phenomenal in providing that service. And one of the challenges that I saw, despite all the success that I had with them, is it was hard to get into as a company that is smaller than Verizon, the below Fortune 500 market. There was a financial barrier, the whole financial unpredictability of that model, not knowing how much it's going to cost me at the end of the year. A company that's not the size of Verizon and with the deep pockets of Verizon couldn't really afford to get into something like that. And also the second challenge that I saw was the operational overhead. So while I was able to not hire a team internally and engage that community instead so that they can find the security vulnerabilities for me, I still had to hire a team internally who was just as knowledgeable to consume all the data that they were sending me. So analyzing those two challenges that I saw firsthand there, and I said, well, wait a minute, there's a huge market there that is, again, below the Fortune 500 mark that needs this just as much as Verizon, Facebook, Twitter, and Google, and all these big names, just as much as they do, if not more. How can we repackage that same concept, same idea, and offer that for them so that they can also get the benefit? And that's where we made the decision to start Cesppa. So I reached out to a good friend of mine, Clark Landry, who's a serial entrepreneur down here in LA. Amazing guy. I've known him for about 15 years. Reached out to him and I said, hey man, I have a crazy idea. I'm thinking about starting this. And I just shared it with him, and he came back a week later and he said, I couldn't sleep thinking about it. Let's do it. And long story short, we went out and raised some money from top VCs here in LA and elsewhere, great investors. And we went to market, and we've been having fun ever since, working with the same security community that I enjoyed working with back at Verizon, and making new friends along the way, and helping a ton of customers.
Very cool. So we've talked about the pandemic a little bit, and I have to believe that it really didn't cause any major challenges or roadblocks for you. But well, go ahead. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, everybody is suffering one way or another, but we're fortunate, in that regard that it didn't affect us because by design, our service doesn't go away because of the pandemic. As a matter of fact, it's needed more.
Right.
Think about the chaos that's happening, and especially when we were all forced to go work remotely late March, every company was just struggling, scrambling, trying to get everybody to operate remotely when they didn't have the function or the functionality
Right.
to support that system. They opened up a lot of backdoors. So naturally, they exposed themselves even more. So that helped us a little bit in that regard. But also, we've been vertical agnostic as far as our clients go. Some of our clients are, social media influencer management platforms. Some are crypto exchanges. Some are supporting the Department of Justice and federal agencies. So we have all these different customers that are, again, vertical agnostic. Some are booming through the pandemic. Others, of course, are struggling a little bit. But naturally, some are saying, hey, I'm in a pinch. Others are saying, hey, I need more services. So we've been okay. Our outreaches have been going through the roof. As a matter of fact, we are hiring. I do have a few headcounts that we just opened up last week. Now, 6 weeks into the pandemic, our sales are going through the roof. We had our best month ever in March when the pandemic happened. So knock on wood, we've been very, very fortunate and lucky.
Cool. So you basically answered my question, but it is safe to assume that the pandemic did cause some challenges for your customers.
Some of our customers, yeah, of course. Again, being the vertical agnostic, we had customers who are servicing and supporting industries that are absolutely on standstill right now. And there are others who are in the gaming industry. And trust me, they are actually seeing a lot of traffic that they didn't see just a couple of months ago. So again, it's a trade-off. But all in all, we're supporting everyone who needs our help. We've actually been doing a lot of outreach to customers or prospects who we know that they're not in a position to use our service or sign up for our service today, but we've been proactively reaching out and saying, how can I help? Let me help you out.
Wow, very interesting. So there are companies like Gabriel that help develop, build, and scale products, especially for startups like yourself and some of your customers maybe. How important do you think this will be going forward for companies that need to hire really good talent and, right now, basically?
Well, so the who to hire is still going to be a challenge for those who figured out, okay, now we can operate remotely and we can go ahead and hire from anywhere in the world, or at least anywhere in the US. Now the question of, okay, well, how do we qualify the candidate? We used to just sit in one room and talk to that person and do a whiteboard session and figure out how they think. I can't do that remotely anymore. How do I figure that out? So you folks come into that position where you can help ignite that process and help figure out processes for them to build out and improve, leverage, and turn on for them as a turnkey solution.
Yeah, very good. So Joseph, this has been really fascinating, and I'm sure you have some great stories you could tell, would like to tell, but you can't. But I want to thank you for your time today. This has been really interesting, and I want to wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Mark. Really enjoyed
this.
Great
night.
Thank you, you too.